The kitchen light cast long shadows across the apartment as Aaron Phillips stood at the counter, his hands gripping the marble edge so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Behind him, Stephen Hughes sat at the small dining table, close enough that Aaron could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely Stephen made Aaron's chest tighten with an ache that had become as constant as breathing. Stephen's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the apartment, it might as well have been a shout. About missing when we were close like this, when things were simple between us. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. 3 words, 3 simple words that had been building between them for months, pressing against the careful boundaries they had constructed around their friendship like water against a dam. He turned slowly, his heart hammering so hard he was certain Stephen could hear it, and found those familiar brown eyes watching him with an expression that was equal parts hope and terror. Quote 2, Aaron began, but his voice cracked on the name, and he had to clear his throat before continuing. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them had been brave enough to voice until now. Stephen's gaze dropped to Aaron's lips for just a moment, so brief Aaron might have imagined it. But the way Stephen's breathing changed told him he hadn't imagined anything at all. Quote 4, Stephen said, rising from his chair with deliberate slowness. Quote 5. Aaron felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. This moment, this conversation, it was everything he had dreamed of and everything he had feared for the better part of 2 years. Before we see how this ends, tell us where you are watching from and hype this video in the comments. But to understand how they had arrived at this moment, standing in Aaron's kitchen at 11:30 on a Tuesday night with the weight of unspoken feelings finally demanding to be heard, the story needed to begin 3 months earlier, when Aaron Phillips first realized that his best friend of 5 years might be the love of his life. It had been a Thursday in September when the realization hit him like a physical blow. They had been sitting on Aaron's couch, Stephen sprawled across the cushions with his head in Aaron's lap, while they watched some mindless comedy neither of them was really paying attention to. Stephen had been complaining about his latest relationship disaster, a woman named Jennifer, who had apparently spent their entire 3-month relationship trying to change fundamental aspects of his personality. Quote 6, Stephen had said, his voice carrying into that particular note of frustrated confusion that always made Aaron want to gather him up and protect him from the world. Quote 7. Aaron had been running his fingers through Stephen's hair without really thinking about it, the way he had done countless times over the years of their friendship. It was a gesture so natural, so automatic, that he never questioned it. But that night, as Stephen's eyes fluttered closed at the gentle contact and a soft sigh escaped his lips, something shifted in Aaron's chest. He found himself cataloging the moment with startling clarity. The weight of Stephen's head against his thigh, the way the lamplight caught the gold flecks in Stephen's brown hair, the trust implicit in the way Stephen had positioned himself, vulnerable and open, seeking comfort in Aaron's presence. And underneath it all, the growing awareness that this feeling blooming in his chest was not the platonic affection of friendship, but something deeper, more complex, more terrifying. Quote 8, Aaron had said quietly, his fingers still moving through Stephen's hair. You feel things deeply. That's not a flaw, it's a gift. Jennifer just wasn't the right person to appreciate it. Stephen had opened his eyes then, looking up at Aaron with an expression that was soft and grateful, and something else Aaron couldn't quite name. The question had lodged itself in Aaron's throat like a stone. Because I love you, he had thought with startling clarity. Because I've been in love with you for God knows how long, and I'm just now brave enough to admit it to myself. But instead of saying any of that, he had simply smiled and continued the gentle motion of his fingers through Stephen's hair until Stephen's breathing evened out and he dozed off right there on Aaron's lap. That had been the moment Aaron's carefully constructed world of denial came crashing down around him. Sitting in his living room with his best friend sleeping trustingly in his lap, Aaron had been forced to confront the truth he had been avoiding for months, maybe years. He was in love with Stephen Hughes. Completely, hopelessly, desperately in love with his straight best friend who dated women and complained about his relationships to Aaron like Aaron was nothing more than a sympathetic ear. The weeks that followed had been a special kind of torture. Aaron found himself hyper-aware of every interaction, every casual touch, every moment of closeness that had once felt natural and easy. When Stephen would lean against him during movie nights, Aaron's skin would practically burn at the contact. When Stephen would hug him goodbye after their weekly dinner dates, Aaron would have to resist the urge to hold on longer than friendship dictated. When Stephen would text him late at night, rambling about work stress or family drama or whatever woman he was currently dating, Aaron would stare at his phone and wonder what it would be like if those messages carried a different kind of intimacy. The worst part was that Stephen seemed completely oblivious to Aaron's internal struggle. He continued to treat Aaron exactly the same way he always had, with the easy affection and casual intimacy that had always characterized their friendship. If anything, Stephen seemed to be seeking out Aaron's company more frequently than usual, showing up at Aaron's apartment unannounced, suggesting impromptu dinner dates, calling just to talk about nothing in particular. "I broke up with Jennifer," Stephen had announced one evening in early October, appearing at Aaron's door with a bottle of wine and a sheepish expression. Quote 12, Aaron had let him in, of course, the same way he always did when Stephen needed a safe harbor from the chaos of his romantic life. They had settled on the couch with the wine, and Aaron had listened as Stephen dissected the relationship with the kind of analytical precision that suggested he had been thinking about it for weeks. To which Stephen had said, swirling the wine in his glass and staring into it like it might contain answers. Quote, Aaron had taken a careful sip of his wine, using the moment to steady himself before responding. Quote, Stephen had said, and there was something almost lost in his voice. Quote, Aaron's heart had clenched at the description because he knew exactly what Stephen was talking about. He felt that connection with Stephen, had felt it for years, had taken it for granted as simply part of their friendship until he realized it was actually part of being in love. But Stephen was describing it as something missing from his romantic relationships, something he had never experienced with any of the women he dated. "Maybe you just haven't found the right person yet," Aaron had said carefully. "Maybe," Stephen had agreed, but there was doubt in his voice. "Or maybe I'm just broken somehow. Maybe I'm expecting too much." "You're not broken," Aaron had said with more force than he intended. "You're not expecting too much. What you're describing, that connection, it exists. It's real. You just have to find someone who can give it to you." Stephen had looked at him then with an expression that was searching and vulnerable, and something that might have been recognition. "How do you know? Have you felt it? That kind of connection?" The question had hit Aaron like a physical blow. "Yes," he had wanted to say. "I feel it with you every day, every conversation, every moment we spend together." But instead, he had nodded vaguely and changed the subject, and Stephen had let him, though Aaron caught him watching him with curious eyes for the rest of the evening. That conversation had marked a turning point in their dynamic, though Aaron wasn't sure Stephen was consciously aware of it. Stephen began seeking out deeper conversations, asking Aaron questions about love and relationships and what he thought it meant to truly know another person. They would sit on Aaron's balcony with coffee or wine, talking until the sun came up about philosophy and dreams and the kind of intimate thoughts most people never share with anyone. During one of these late-night conversations in November, Stephen had asked a question that made Aaron's blood run cold. Stephen had said suddenly, apropos of nothing they had been discussing. Quote 25. Aaron had nearly choked on his coffee. Quote, Stephen had said, but there was something deliberate about his casual tone that suggested he knew exactly what he meant. Quote, Aaron had said carefully, quote, The question was asked quietly, almost hesitantly, and Aaron had the sudden sense that they were having two conversations at once. The surface conversation about sexuality in general, and another deeper conversation about Stephen's own questions and doubts. "Not always," Aaron had admitted. "I think I had an idea when I was younger, but it took time to accept it, to understand what it meant for my life." Stephen had nodded slowly, as if processing this information. "Was it scary, coming to terms with it?" "Terrifying," Aaron had said honestly, "but also relieving, like finally admitting something to yourself that you'd been avoiding for a long time." They had sat in comfortable silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts. But Aaron had caught Stephen watching him with an expression that was thoughtful and almost yearning, and he had wondered if maybe, just maybe, Stephen was beginning to question things about himself that he had never questioned before. The shift in Stephen's behavior became more pronounced as November turned into December. He started showing up at Aaron's apartment at odd hours, sometimes just to sit on the couch and talk, sometimes to help with mundane tasks like grocery shopping or cleaning that he had never shown interest in before. He began initiating physical contact more frequently, casual touches that lingered just a moment longer than necessary, hugs that felt more like embraces than friendly greetings. One evening in mid-December, Stephen had arrived at Aaron's door looking uncharacteristically nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot and running his hands through his hair in the way he did when he was anxious about something. Quote 37, he had said without preamble. Quote 38. Aaron had felt his stomach drop, but he had nodded and stepped aside to let Stephen in. They had settled on the couch, but instead of sprawling across it the way he usually did, Stephen had sat facing Aaron, his expression serious and intent. Quote 39. Stephen had asked, the words coming out in a rush as if he was afraid he would lose his nerve if he didn't say them quickly. Aaron's heart had stopped beating entirely for a moment before resuming at double speed. He had said carefully. Aaron had said quietly. Farm. Quote 40. Aaron had studied Stephen's face, looking for clues about where this conversation was heading. It was terrifying and wonderful and nothing like I expected. Why are you asking me this? Stephen had been quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on his hands where they were clasped in his lap. I've been thinking about it, he had said finally. A lot, actually, and I don't know what that means. What have you been thinking about specifically? Kissing you, Stephen had said so quietly Aaron almost missed it. I've been thinking about kissing you, and I don't understand why, and it's driving me crazy. The words had hung in the air between them like a live wire, dangerous and electric and impossible to ignore. Aaron had felt his entire world shift on its axis. The careful boundaries of their friendship suddenly called into question by Stephen's admission. Quote 52. Aaron had started, but Stephen had held up a hand to stop him. Quote 3. Stephen had said. Quote 54. Aaron had felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, a mixture of hope and terror and overwhelming love for this brave, confused, wonderful man who was sitting on his couch admitting to thoughts that mirrored Aaron's own secret desires. It doesn't change anything, Aaron had said, though they both knew it was a lie. We're friends, we'll always be friends. But what if I don't want to just be friends, Stephen had asked, and there was something desperate in his voice. What if I want more than that, even though I don't understand what that means or how it would work? Aaron had reached for Stephen's hands then, covering them with his own and marveling at how right the contact felt. Quote Tan, he had said. Quote Humpa, quote Shandawan, Stephen had admitted. Quote Hoshan, they had sat like that for a long time, hands intertwined, both of them processing the magnitude of what had just been said. Finally, Stephen had looked up and met Aaron's eyes. Can I stay here tonight? He had asked. I don't want to go home and overthink this until I talk myself out of whatever this is. Aaron had nodded, and they had spent the evening on the couch, talking quietly about everything and nothing, both of them hyper-aware of the new tension that hummed in the air between them. When they finally went to bed, Stephen had hesitated in the doorway of the guest room. Aaron, he had said softly. Yeah? Thank you for not making this weird, for not making me feel like I'm crazy. You're not crazy, Aaron had said. You're brave, braver than I've been. Stephen had smiled then, the first real smile Aaron had seen from him all evening. Good night, Aaron. Good night, Stephen. But Aaron had lain awake for hours that night, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the fact that Stephen, his Stephen, was questioning his sexuality and apparently questioning it specifically in relation to Aaron. It felt too good to be true, too much like wish fulfillment to be real. But Stephen's nervousness and vulnerability had been genuine. This wasn't Aaron's imagination or wishful thinking. This was actually happening. The next few weeks had been a delicate dance of exploration and discovery. Stephen had become even more physically affectionate, finding excuses to touch Aaron's hand or shoulder, sitting closer to him on the couch, lingering in hugs until Aaron's heart felt like it might beat out of his chest. They had talked more about sexuality and attraction and what it meant to question assumptions you had held about yourself your entire life. Quote Dwaptum. Stephen had said one evening as they sat on Aaron's balcony sharing a bottle of wine, trying to figure out what was missing, And I think maybe what was missing was that I was trying to force myself to feel something I just don't feel. What do you mean? I mean, maybe I'm not as straight as I thought I was, Stephen had said, the words coming easier now than they had a few weeks earlier. Maybe I've been looking for connection in the wrong places with the wrong people. Aaron had felt his breath catch. And where do you think you should be looking? Stephen had turned to face him then, his expression soft and open, and full of something that looked dangerously close to love. I think maybe I should be looking at the person who's been right in front of me all along. The conversation had led to their first real moment of physical intimacy. Stephen had reached for Aaron's hand, intertwining their fingers and bringing Aaron's knuckles to his lips for the softest, most tentative kiss Aaron had ever experienced. It had been barely a brush of lips against skin, but it had sent electricity shooting through Aaron's entire body. Stephen had asked, his voice uncertain, "What are you saying?" Aaron had whispered, and Stephen had smiled and pressed another soft kiss to Aaron's knuckles, then another to his wrist, then up along his forearm until Aaron was trembling with want and anticipation. "I want to try something," Stephen had said, his voice low and rough, "but I need you to tell me if it's too much, okay?" Aaron had nodded, not trusting his voice, and Stephen had leaned closer, close enough that Aaron could feel his breath against his cheek, close enough that Aaron's eyes fluttered closed in anticipation of a kiss that never came. Instead, Stephen had simply rested his forehead against Aaron's, both of them breathing heavily in the small space between them. "I'm scared," Stephen had whispered. "Me too," Aaron had whispered back. "But I want this. I want you. I just need time to figure out what that means." "We have time," Aaron had said. "We have all the time you need." They had stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, sharing breath and space, and the kind of intimate connection Aaron had dreamed about for months. When Stephen had finally pulled back, his eyes had been bright with unshed tears. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Stephen had said quietly. "And that terrifies me because I never thought I could fall in love with a man. But here we are, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Aaron's heart had felt like it might explode from the sheer joy of hearing those words. What he had said. Stephen had cupped Aaron's face in his hands then, thumbs brushing across his cheekbones in a gesture so tender it made Aaron's chest ache. Aaron had said, and he had meant every word. That night had marked the beginning of a new phase in their relationship, though they hadn't defined it or put labels on it. They had simply begun exploring this new dynamic between them, taking things slowly and carefully, both of them acutely aware that they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Stephen had started spending more nights at Aaron's apartment, though they maintained separate sleeping arrangements. They would lie on Aaron's bed together, fully clothed, talking quietly and holding hands and occasionally sharing soft, hesitant kisses that left them both breathless and wanting more. Stephen was clearly working through his own internal process, sometimes pulling away when things became too intense, sometimes initiating contact that surprised Aaron with its boldness. Quote 96. Stephen had said one evening as they lay facing each other on Aaron's bed, their hands intertwined between them, "I thought it was just something people made up to sell romance novels. But this, what I feel with you, it's like electricity." Aaron had smiled and brought Stephen's hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to his palm. Quote 99. Stephen had asked suddenly, quote when. Aaron had said carefully, quote won, quote weren't, Stephen had said. Quote Wharton, quote woman, Aaron had said. Quote once, Stephen had been quiet for a moment, processing this. Quote 107, he had said finally. Quote 107. The holidays had brought their own complications. Stephen's family had expected him to bring a girlfriend to Christmas dinner, and he had struggled with how to explain his current situation without having to come out before he was ready. Aaron's family had been more understanding, though they had been surprised when Stephen had joined them for their traditional Christmas Eve gathering as something more than just Aaron's friend. "He makes you happy," Aaron's mother had observed, as she and Aaron washed dishes together while Stephen helped Aaron's father set up the new television. "I can see it in your face. You light up when you look at him." "It's complicated," Aaron had said. "The best relationships usually are," his mother had replied. "But complicated doesn't mean wrong." Sometimes it just means worth fighting for. New Year's Eve had been a turning point. They had spent the evening at home, just the two of them, cooking dinner together and watching movies and talking about their hopes for the coming year. As midnight approached, they had found themselves on Aaron's balcony, watching fireworks bloom across the city skyline. "I want this year to be different," Stephen had said as they stood side by side, their shoulders touching. "I want to stop being afraid of what I feel. I want to stop second-guessing everything." "What does that mean?" Aaron had asked. "It means," Stephen had said, turning to face him, "that I want to kiss you at midnight. Really kiss you, not just those careful, hesitant kisses we've been sharing. I want to kiss you like I mean it." Aaron's heart had started racing. Quote point, when the clock struck 12 and the fireworks exploded overhead, Stephen had kept his promise. He had kissed Aaron with a passion and certainty that left no room for doubt or hesitation. It had been everything Aaron had dreamed their first real kiss would be, and more. Desperate and tender, and full of months of suppressed longing, finally given permission to surface. When they had finally broken apart, both breathing heavily, Stephen had rested his forehead against Aaron's and smiled. "Happy New Year, Aaron." "Happy New Year, Stephen." January had brought a new level of intimacy to their relationship. They had finally begun sleeping in the same bed, though they moved slowly and carefully, both of them aware that they were navigating uncharted territory. Stephen was still working through his own understanding of his sexuality, still occasionally pulling back when things moved too quickly, but the foundation of trust and communication they had built allowed them to navigate these moments with patience and understanding. "I had lunch with my sister yesterday," Stephen had said one afternoon as they sat on Aaron's couch. Stephen's head pillowed in Aaron's lap while Aaron ran his fingers through his hair. Quote 124 quote wasn't, Stephen had said. Quote wasn't, Aaron had smiled at this. Quote 101, quote 20, Stephen had said. Quote 130. They had talked about the future more frequently as winter turned into spring. Stephen had been gradually coming out to close friends and family members, a process that was sometimes difficult but ultimately liberating. Aaron had been there to support him through every conversation, every moment of doubt, every small victory. Stephen had said one evening in March, as they lay in bed together, Aaron's arms wrapped around him from behind, "I want to stop hiding this. I want to be able to hold your hand in public and introduce you as my boyfriend and not worry about what people think." "Are you ready for that?" Aaron had asked. "I think so," Stephen had said. "I know it might be complicated, especially at work, but I'm tired of living in this weird limbo where we're together but no one knows about it." "Then we'll tell people," Aaron had said. "Whatever you're comfortable with, whenever you're ready." The process of coming out as a couple had been easier than either of them had expected. Their friends had been universally supportive, many of them admitting they had suspected something was developing between Aaron and Stephen for months. Stephen's family had taken some time to adjust, but they had ultimately embraced Aaron and the happiness he brought to Stephen's life. Aaron's family had welcomed Stephen with open arms, treating him like the son-in-law they had always hoped Aaron would find. By April, they had settled into a comfortable rhythm as a couple. Stephen had officially moved into Aaron's apartment, and they had fallen into the kind of domestic routine that felt natural and right. They cooked dinner together most evenings, took turns doing laundry and cleaning, spent lazy Sunday mornings in bed, reading and talking, and making love with a tenderness that still took Aaron's breath away. Quote 138. Stephen had confessed one evening as they sat on their balconies sharing a bottle of wine. Quote 139, quote 40, then Aaron had said, quote, "Were Stephen had laughed, quote, then, quote, Aaron had said, reaching for Stephen's hand, "I feel it too." "Do you think we would have figured this out eventually?" Stephen had asked. "If I hadn't had that crisis about Jennifer, if I hadn't started questioning everything about my life, would we have ever gotten here?" Aaron had considered this question seriously. "I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Maybe not as quickly, maybe not in the same way, but yes, I think this was always where we were headed. I'm glad we didn't wait any longer." Stephen had said, "I'm glad I was brave enough to tell you what I was thinking, even when I didn't understand it myself." "I'm glad you trusted me enough to figure it out together," Aaron had said. That conversation had taken place 3 weeks ago, And since then, they had continued to deepen their connection and build their life together. Stephen had officially come out at work. Aaron had introduced Stephen to his extended family at a cousin's wedding, and they had begun making plans for a summer vacation together, which brought them back to this Tuesday evening in May, standing in their kitchen after Stephen had spent the day helping his sister move into a new apartment. He had come home tired and slightly melancholy, missing the easy intimacy they had shared during the early days of their relationship when everything was new and uncertain and electric. Wabahani, Stephen had said as they stood at the kitchen counter, ostensibly making tea but really just seeking excuses to be near each other. Quote, once do you... Aaron had felt his heart clench at the wistfulness in Stephen's voice. We're still close, he had said. We're closer than we've ever been. I know, and Stephen had said, but sometimes I miss that feeling of discovery, that sense that we were crossing new territory together. That was when Aaron had turned to face him, when Stephen had said he missed when they were close like this, and Aaron had felt the familiar electricity arc between them. That was when Stephen had stood up from the table and crossed the kitchen to stand close enough that Aaron could feel the warmth of his body, close enough that the space between them hummed with possibility. I meant what I said earlier, Stephen had said, his voice soft and intimate in the quiet kitchen, about missing when we were close like this, when things were simple between us. And Aaron had turned to face him, his heart racing with the same anticipation he had felt during those early days when every conversation felt like a step closer to something wonderful and terrifying. Stephen, Aaron had said, his voice catching on the name. What are you saying? I'm saying, Stephen had said, moving closer still, that I think we both know this isn't just friendship anymore, and I'm tired of pretending it is. The words hung in the air between them, and Aaron felt his breath catch as he realized that Stephen was deliberately echoing the conversation that had started everything between them months ago. This was Stephen's way of bringing them full circle, of acknowledging how far they had come, while also recognizing that the fundamental truth remained the same. They loved each other. They chose each other. Every day, in every moment, they continued to choose each other. Quote 63. Aaron said softly, reaching up to cup Stephen's face in his hands. We haven't been pretending for a long time. No, Stephen agreed, leaning into the touch. But sometimes I think we take it for granted. This thing between us. How extraordinary it is. Aaron's thumbs brushed across Stephen's cheekbones, marveling as he always did at the trust in Stephen's expression, the way Stephen leaned into his touch like he was coming home. Quote 167, Aaron said. Quote, DJ, quote, what Stephen said. Quote, honey, quote, 21, Aaron said. Quote, wanted, Stephen smiled then, the soft, private smile that was reserved only for Aaron. Quote, Wahern, he said. Quote, quote, one of his, Aaron said. And then he was kissing Stephen the way he had wanted to kiss him that first night on the balcony, with all the passion and certainty and overwhelming love that had been building between them for months. Stephen kissed him back with equal fervor, his hands tangling in Aaron's hair, his body pressing closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Stephen rested his forehead against Aaron's and smiled. Quote, 176, he said softly. 177, quote, Aaron said. Quote, quote, ease. Stephen said, the words carrying the same weight they had carried that first night he had said them, as if he was still amazed by the truth of them. Quote, Aaron replied. Quote, They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet kitchen, both of them aware that they had just renewed something essential between them. The routine and domesticity of their relationship was wonderful, but so was this, these moments of deliberate recognition and choice. Stephen said finally, his voice low and intimate. Before, Aaron felt heat pool in his stomach at the invitation. Even after months together, Stephen's desire for him still felt like a gift, something precious and not to be taken for granted. I thought you'd never ask, he said, and Stephen laughed and took his hand, leading him toward their bedroom. Later, as they lay tangled together in their bed, Stephen's head pillowed on Aaron's chest and Aaron's fingers running lazily through his hair, Aaron reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, he had been convinced that his love for Stephen was hopeless, destined to remain unspoken and unrequited. The idea that Stephen might question his own sexuality, might develop feelings for Aaron in return, had seemed like nothing more than wishful thinking. But here they were, 6 months later, building a life together that was both extraordinary and beautifully ordinary. They had their routines and their inside jokes and their small domestic squabbles. They also had these moments of electric connection and deliberate choice and overwhelming love that made everything else worthwhile. Quote 106. Stephen asked sleepily, his breath warm against Aaron's chest. Just how lucky we are, Aaron said. How unlikely this all was, and how perfect it turned out to be. Not perfect, Stephen said, echoing Aaron's earlier words. Quote one him. Quote one him, Aaron agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of Stephen's head. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, in the bed they shared, in the apartment they had made into a home, in the life they had built together, one brave conversation at a time. And if Aaron dreamed that night of kitchen conversations and first kisses, and the moment Stephen had first said he wanted to figure things out together, well, those were good dreams to have. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and Aaron woke to find Stephen already awake beside him, propped up on one elbow and watching Aaron with an expression that was soft and fond and completely content. Good morning, Stephen said, leaning down to press a gentle kiss to Aaron's lips. Quote 193. Aaron replied, his voice rough with sleep. Quote 194. Quote Manin, Stephen said. Quote Isawan and quote Nahan and quote Umayan, Stephen said. Quote nice, and Aaron reached up to cup Stephen's face, his thumb tracing along Stephen's cheekbone. Quote Ohanachitan, he said with certainty. And quote Tuoan, quote Shun, Stephen said, and there was something vulnerable in his voice that made Aaron's chest tighten with love. I promise, Aaron said. I promise we'll keep choosing each other. I promise we'll keep recognizing how extraordinary this is. I promise we'll never take it for granted. Stephen smiled then, bright and beautiful and completely trusting. I love you, Aaron Phillips. I love you too, Stephen Hughes. They lay there for a few more minutes, trading lazy kisses and quiet words, before the demands of the day required them to get up and shower and make coffee and begin the routine that Stephen had been missing the night before. But now the routine felt different, imbued with the kind of intentional appreciation that would keep it from becoming mundane. As Aaron stood at the kitchen counter making coffee while Stephen showered, he thought about the conversation they had had the night before and the promise he had made that morning. It wasn't enough to simply love someone, he realized. You had to keep choosing to love them, keep recognizing the gift of their presence in your life, keep cultivating the sense of wonder that had brought you together in the first place. He was still thinking about this when Stephen emerged from the bathroom, hair damp and face bright from the hot water. He moved to stand behind Aaron, wrapping his arms around Aaron's waist and pressing a kiss to the back of his neck. Thank you, Stephen said quietly. For what? For reminding me last night that the routine doesn't diminish what we have. For helping me see that choosing each other every day is just as romantic as those early moments of discovery. Aaron leaned back into Stephen's embrace, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. Quote 2 out of 10, quote 211. Stephen said, and Aaron could hear the smile in his voice. They stood like that for a moment, Aaron safe in the circle of Stephen's arms, both of them aware that they were creating another small moment of intentional appreciation to add to their collection. These moments, Aaron realized, were what would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The memory of how it felt to choose each other, again and again, in big ways and small ones. We should probably get ready for work, Stephen said eventually, though he made no move to let go of Aaron. Probably, Aaron agreed, though he also made no move to step away from Stephen's embrace. Stephen said, Aaron agreed, but they stood there for closer to 10 minutes, neither of them willing to break the spell of the morning, neither of them ready to let go of this moment of perfect contentment. When they finally did separate, it was with the kind of reluctant affection that spoke to how much they genuinely enjoyed each other's company, even after months of living together. The day passed in the usual way, with work and errands and the small negotiations of shared life. But there was something different about it, a heightened awareness of the gift they had been given in finding each other. When Aaron came home to find Stephen already there, cooking dinner and humming softly to himself, Aaron felt his heart swell with the kind of gratitude that never got old. How was your day? Stephen asked, looking up from the stove with a smile that was warm and welcoming and completely genuine. Better now, Aaron said, moving to kiss Stephen hello the way he did every evening. the way he hoped he would continue to do for the rest of their lives. Cheesy, Stephen said, but he was smiling as he said it, and he pulled Aaron closer for another kiss that tasted like contentment and possibility and home. That evening, as they sat on their balcony sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sun set over the city, Aaron reflected on how much had changed since that first conversation 6 months ago when Stephen had admitted to thinking about kissing him. They had built something beautiful together, something that was both passionate and comfortable, both exciting and stable. "I have something to tell you," Stephen said suddenly, and there was something in his voice that made Aaron look at him more closely. "What is it?" Stephen reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Aaron's heart stopped beating entirely for a moment before resuming at double speed. Code 221, Stephen said, his voice nervous but determined. Quote 222. Aaron felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes as Stephen opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Quote 223. Stephen said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. Quote Tom, the question hung in the air between them, and Aaron felt the same sense of the world shifting on its axis that he had felt that first night when Stephen had admitted his feelings. This was another moment of crossing into new territory, another moment of choosing to be brave together. Aaron said, his voice barely above a whisper. Quote 226. Stephen's face broke into the brightest smile Aaron had ever seen, and then he was sliding the ring onto Aaron's finger and kissing him with a passion that spoke to months of love and trust and the promise of a lifetime more to come. When they finally broke apart, both crying and laughing at the same time, Stephen rested his forehead against Aaron's and smiled. "I love you," he said. "I love you, and I choose you, and I want to keep choosing you for the rest of our lives." "I love you too," Aaron said, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." They sat there on their balcony as the sun finished setting, holding each other and marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, Aaron had been convinced that his love for Stephen was hopeless. Now Stephen was his fiancé, his partner, his person for life. "So," Stephen said eventually, his voice light with happiness, "I guess this means we're engaged." "I guess it does," Aaron agreed, looking down at the ring on his finger and feeling a surge of joy so intense it was almost overwhelming. "Any regrets?" Stephen asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Only that it took us so long to figure this out," Aaron said. "Only that we wasted so much time being afraid." "We weren't wasting time," Stephen said. "We were getting ready. We needed to be the people we are now to make this work." Aaron considered this and realized Stephen was right. If they had tried to navigate a relationship 6 months earlier, before Stephen had done the work of understanding his own sexuality, before Aaron had learned to be brave enough to speak his feelings, it might not have worked. They had needed to grow into the people who could love each other this completely. "You're right," Aaron said. "Everything happened exactly when it was supposed to happen. And now we get to plan a wedding," Stephen said, grinning. "Our wedding." "Our wedding," Aaron repeated, testing out the words and finding them perfect. They spent the rest of the evening talking about their future, about the kind of wedding they wanted and the kind of life they hoped to build together. They talked about traveling and maybe buying a house and the possibility of children someday. They talked about growing old together and all the adventures they would have along the way. "I want to call my sister," Stephen said as they were getting ready for bed. "I want to tell her we're engaged. She's going to be so excited." "Call her," Aaron said. "Call everyone. I want the whole world to know." Stephen laughed and pulled Aaron into his arms. "I love how happy you are about this." "I love how happy we are about this," Aaron corrected. "Both of us, together." "Together," Stephen agreed, and then he was kissing Aaron again. And Aaron thought that he could spend the rest of his life being kissed by this man and never get tired of it. They made love that night with a tenderness and passion that felt different from all the times before, imbued now with the promise of forever. Afterward, as they lay wrapped around each other in the darkness, Aaron felt a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. "Stephen," he said softly. "Hmm? Thank you for being brave enough to question everything. Thank you for being willing to figure it out with me." "Thank you for waiting for me to catch up," Stephen replied. "Thank you for loving me even when I didn't understand what that meant." "I would have waited forever," Aaron said, and he meant it. "I know," Stephen said. That's one of the reasons I love you so much. They fell asleep that night as an engaged couple, and Aaron dreamed of wedding days and anniversary dinners and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that lay ahead of them. When he woke the next morning to find Stephen already awake beside him, watching him with an expression of pure love and contentment, Aaron felt his heart swell with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. "Good morning, fiancé," Stephen said, and Aaron loved the way the words sounded in Stephen's voice. "Oh, 261. Aaron replied, and they both started laughing at the novelty of it, at the joy of being able to use that word to describe each other. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of wedding planning and celebration. Their friends and family were universally thrilled by the engagement, and Aaron found himself constantly amazed by the outpouring of love and support they received. Stephen's family, who had initially struggled with his coming out, embraced the engagement wholeheartedly, treating Aaron like the son they had always hoped Stephen would bring home. "I never thought I would see Stephen this happy," Stephen's mother confided to Aaron during their engagement party. "2263, 64, Aaron replied. "Quote boys fine, quote mouse," she said, smiling. "Quote our soundant." The wedding planning process was surprisingly smooth, mostly because Aaron and Stephen found themselves in agreement about most of the important decisions. They wanted something intimate and meaningful, surrounded by the people who mattered most to them. They wanted to focus on the commitment they were making to each other, rather than getting caught up in elaborate details. Woke to 268. Stephen said one evening as they sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by wedding magazines and vendor contracts. Quote to 216, quote a 27. Aaron said, reaching across the table to take Stephen's hand. "But I also want to celebrate what we have. I want to mark this moment in a way that honors how far we've come." "You're right," Stephen said, bringing Aaron's hand to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to his knuckles. They settled on a small ceremony in the garden of Aaron's childhood home, followed by a dinner party for their closest friends and family. It would be intimate, impersonal, and exactly right for them. As their wedding day approached, Aaron found himself thinking often about the journey that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, he had been convinced that his love for Stephen was hopeless. Now, in just a few days, Stephen would become his husband. The transformation still felt miraculous, like something out of a fairy tale rather than real life. "Are you nervous?" Stephen asked the night before their wedding, as they lay in bed together for the last time as an unmarried couple. "Not nervous," Aaron said, considering the question seriously. "Excited, grateful. A little overwhelmed by how perfect this all feels." "I know what you mean," Stephen said. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. That we're real." "We're real, Vatrin," Aaron said, turning to face Stephen in the darkness. "We're real, and we're getting married tomorrow, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives loving each other." "Promise me something," Stephen said, echoing the conversation they had had months earlier. "Anything. Promise me we'll never stop appreciating this. Promise me we'll always remember how extraordinary it is that we found each other." "I promise," Aaron said without hesitation. "I promise we'll never take this for granted." Stephen smiled and pulled Aaron closer, and they fell asleep that night holding each other, both of them aware that they were on the threshold of something wonderful. Their wedding day dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift from the universe. Aaron woke early, too excited and happy to sleep, and spent the morning getting ready with his best man and closest friends. Stephen was getting ready at his sister's house, and they had decided not to see each other until the ceremony, wanting to preserve the magic of that first moment when Stephen would see Aaron waiting for him at the altar. Quote 286. Aaron's best friend said as Aaron adjusted his tie for the 10th time, "Stephen is going to lose his mind when he sees you." "I hope so," Aaron said, grinning. "I want to take his breath away." "Trust me," his friend said. "You will." The ceremony was everything Aaron had hoped it would be, and more. When Stephen appeared at the end of the garden path, looking impossibly handsome in his dark suit and radiating joy, Aaron felt his heart stop and restart and overflow with love. Stephen's eyes found his immediately, and the smile that spread across Stephen's face was so bright it could have powered the entire city. They had written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, Aaron found his voice steady and strong, despite the tears streaming down his face. "Stephen," he said, looking directly into the eyes of the man he loved more than life itself. 6 months ago, You told me you were thinking about kissing me, and you changed my entire world. Today, I want to promise you that I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of the trust you placed in me that night. I promise to love you with the same courage you showed when you questioned everything you thought you knew about yourself. I promise to choose you every day, in every way, for the rest of our lives. Stephen was crying openly by the time Aaron finished, and when it was his turn to speak, his voice was thick with emotion. Aaron Hesse, he said, you taught me that love isn't about fitting into predetermined categories or meeting other people's expectations. You taught me that love is about finding someone who sees you completely and chooses you anyway. You waited for me to figure out who I was, and then you helped me become the best version of that person. I promise to love you with the same patience and generosity you showed me. I promise to never stop being amazed by the gift of your love. When the officiant pronounced them married and invited them to kiss, Aaron felt like his heart might burst from sheer happiness. The kiss was soft and sweet and perfect, and when they broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. I love you, husband, Stephen whispered against Aaron's lips. Good 297. Aaron whispered back. The reception was a blur of congratulations and dancing and toasts that made them both cry happy tears. Aaron's father gave a speech about how he had never seen Aaron as happy as he was with Stephen. Stephen's sister talked about how Stephen had finally found the person who brought out the best in him. Their friends shared stories about their journey from friendship to love that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. But the moment that stood out most to Aaron was when they had their first dance as a married couple. Stephen held him close as they swayed to the music, both of them aware that they were surrounded by everyone they loved most in the world, both of them overwhelmed by the perfection of the moment. Quote 298, Stephen said softly as they danced. Quote 299, quote Marn, Aaron agreed. Quote 3, quote 3, and Aaron considered the question, taking stock of the joy and contentment and overwhelming love that filled his chest. Quote 303, he said finally. Quote 309, quote, Stephen said, pulling Aaron closer. Quote 3, quote, there's some numb. They danced until late into the evening, surrounded by their friends and family, celebrating the love they had found and the commitment they had made. When the last guest finally left and they were alone in their hotel room, they sat on the bed still wearing their wedding clothes and marveled at the day they had just experienced. Quote 30, Stephen said, looking down at the ring on his finger with wonder. Quote 30, Aaron replied. Quote 310, quote 301, Stephen said. Quote 313, quote Bertram, Aaron said. Quote Barbarin, Stephen smiled and reached for Aaron, pulling him close for a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. Quote Crown, he said against Aaron's lips. I love being married to you too, Aaron replied. They made love that night as a married couple, and it felt different somehow, imbued with the weight of the promises they had made and the commitment they had sealed. Afterward, as they lay wrapped around each other in the darkness, Aaron felt a sense of completeness and contentment that was deeper than anything he had ever experienced. Stephen, he said softly. Thank you for the most perfect day of my life. Thank you for saying yes when I proposed, Stephen replied. Thank you for choosing me. I'll choose you every day for the rest of our lives, Aaron said, and he meant every word. I'll choose you too, Stephen said. Always. They fell asleep that night as newlyweds, and Aaron dreamed of all the anniversaries and adventures that lay ahead of them. When he woke the next morning to find Stephen already awake beside him, watching him with an expression of pure love and contentment, Aaron felt his heart swell with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. Good morning, husband, Stephen said, and Aaron loved the way the words sounded in Stephen's voice. Quote 326. Aaron replied, and they both started laughing at the joy of being able to use that word to describe each other. They spent their honeymoon in a small cabin by a lake, just the two of them, and the kind of perfect solitude that allowed them to simply be together without any outside distractions. They slept late and made love and took long walks and talked about their dreams for the future. It was exactly what they both needed after the excitement and chaos of the wedding. 327. Stephen said one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset over the water, about spending your life being worthy of the trust I placed in you. What about it? I want you to know that you've already proven yourself worthy 1,000 times over. Stephen said. The way you waited for me to figure things out, the way you supported me through coming out, the way you love me even when I'm difficult or confused or scared. You've already shown me more patience and generosity than I ever thought possible. Aaron felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. You make it easy, he said. Loving you has never felt like work. It's always felt like the most natural thing in the world. It is natural, Stephen said. This thing between us, it's the most natural thing I've ever experienced. Even when I was confused about my sexuality, even when I didn't understand what I was feeling, being with you always felt right. I'm glad we found our way to each other, Aaron said. I'm glad we were brave enough to take the risk. Me too, Stephen said, reaching for Aaron's hand. Chapter 339. They returned from their honeymoon refreshed and more in love than ever, ready to begin their life as a married couple. They settled back into their routines, but everything felt different now, imbued with the weight and joy of their commitment to each other. Kondafar, Stephen said one evening as they cooked dinner together in their kitchen. Oh, Aaron said, moving to wrap his arms around Stephen from behind. Kodafari, Stephen said, leaning back into Aaron's embrace. We took something that could have been just friendship and turned it into something extraordinary. We recognized what we had and we chose to nurture it, Aaron said. We chose to be brave together. And now we get to keep choosing each other, Stephen said. Every day for the rest of our lives. Every day, Aaron agreed, pressing a kiss to Stephen's neck. As the months passed, they continued to grow and evolve as a couple. They faced challenges and celebrated victories together. They learned new things about each other and found new ways to show their love. They built a life that was both passionate and comfortable, both exciting and quote, 3-1, Stephen said one evening as they sat on their balcony sharing a bottle of wine, much as they had that first night when Stephen had admitted to thinking about kissing Aaron. Quote 352, Aaron asked, though Stephen's tone suggested this was good news rather than something to worry about. I got the promotion, Stephen said, grinning, the one I interviewed for last month. They offered it to me today. Aaron felt his face break into a huge smile. Stephen, that's incredible. Congratulations. Thank you, Stephen said, pulling Aaron close for a celebratory kiss. I couldn't have done it without your support. You believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I always believe in you, Thrain, Aaron said. You're capable of anything you set your mind to. We should celebrate, Stephen said. Dinner at that restaurant you love, the one with the terrible service but amazing food. Absolutely, Aaron said. I'm so proud of you. As they sat there planning their celebration, Aaron reflected on how much their lives had changed since that first conversation about Stephen's confusion and questions. They had built something beautiful together, something that continued to grow and evolve with each passing day. Quote 364, Aaron said suddenly. Quote 365. Quote fiction. Stephen smiled. Quote surrendum. Quote fratum. Quote Stephen said. Quote fun, Aaron said. Quote found, quote first, Stephen said, leaning in to kiss Aaron softly. Quote first and quote found, Aaron said with certainty. Quote fashion and quote some, Stephen agreed. As the sun set over the city and they sat wrapped in each other's arms, Aaron felt a deep sense of contentment and gratitude. They had taken a leap of faith together, and it had led them to exactly where they were supposed to be. They had found love in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person, and it had turned out to be the most natural thing in the world. I love you, Stephen Hughes, Aaron said softly. I love you too, Aaron Phillips, Stephen replied. And as they sat there on their balcony, planning their celebration dinner and talking about their dreams for the future, Aaron knew with absolute certainty that they would continue to choose each other every day for the rest of their lives. They had found something extraordinary in each other, and they would never take it for granted. The story of their love was still being written, still unfolding with each passing day, each shared meal, each quiet conversation on the balcony. But the foundation was solid now, built on trust and honesty, and the kind of brave vulnerability that had allowed them to cross the bridge from friendship to something deeper, something lasting, something that would sustain them through whatever challenges and adventures lay ahead. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that catch you completely off guard, Aaron thought as he watched Stephen's face in the golden light of the setting sun. Sometimes the person you're meant to love has been right in front of you all along, waiting for you both to be brave enough to see what was always there. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that person will look at you one evening and admit they've been thinking about kissing you, and everything will change in the most wonderful way possible. Sometimes the leap of faith you take together will lead you home to exactly where you were always meant to be.